There are 4 basic steps that you need to follow in order to be able to run our nuclear magnetic resonance spectrophotometer to take a sample, an NMR sample, a proton NMR sample of your material. The 4 steps are finding your materials, which will be here. The second step will be preparing the sample, which I'll tell you how to do later. The third step is setting up the instrument, which it will happen in this location over here with your computer. And the fourth step is actually getting your sample done, running the sample, and getting a printout of your NMR spectrum. Now you're going to go to the cabinet and you're going to gather your materials. The first thing that you will get is solvent to prepare your sample in the desiccator. Bring the desiccator down, being very careful because it's heavy. Bring it over to where you will prepare your sample. In the desiccator, you will find the solvent of choice, in this case, deuterated chloroform, a pipette that you would use to transfer that solvent, an NMR tube, a lid to cover your NMR tube. The sample that we're going to be using is a liquid sample. You would transfer a few drops of your sample with a clean pipette into an NMR tube. The level of your liquid sample should not be higher than about 5 millimeters or about 1/4 of an inch in height. When you are done, make sure to put your pipette in a place that you will not mistakenly use it to transfer your solvent. Now you're ready to transfer the solvent to prepare the solution of your liquid sample. You will use the pipette that is labeled with the appropriate name and transfer about 3 to 3.5 centimeters in height. Typically, there will be a reference NMR tube that will tell you how much, by comparison, you have added. If you haven't reached the height, make sure that you add some more solvent. It is okay if you go a little less or a little more than 3 centimeters or 3.5. After you have added your solvent, make sure that you put the lid back on the NMR solvent because it evaporates really easily and is an expensive material. Do the same for your NMR tube. Find a lid or a cap to put over to avoid evaporation of the solvent. Another thing that is very important is to make sure that your sample is properly labeled, is to use a piece of tape. Typically, we have this laboratory tape, and you can make a much better label that way because it allows you to write more on it. Put it on the top of the NMR tube. Never use the bottom of it. Now you can set it on the rack and it's properly labeled for when you are ready to actually run your sample. In this segment, we are going to show you how to prepare a solid sample to run the proton NMR. You will take some of your sample, not all of your sample, and maybe pre-weigh about 5 to 10 or up to 20 milligrams of your solid sample. Then you will get the solvent of choice. Make sure that you use a clean pipette or a pipette that has been appropriately labeled. Transfer some of that solvent into the vial that contains your solid sample. Remember, you only need enough to make a height of 3 to 3.5 centimeters when you transfer that solution to the NMR tube. If the solution is not completely clear, you might add a few more drops of your solvent. You just don't want to add too much that your solution is going to be too dilute. Take a clean NMR tube and a clean pipette to transfer the solution of the sample that you just made. Now we are adding some more solvent, clean solvent, to the vial in which the sample was originally contained to make sure that all of your sample gets transferred into the NMR tube. You can now take the same pipette that you used to transfer the original solution and transfer the remainder of the solution that you just made. You can go ahead and compare that amount to the reference, and as you can see, there is a lot more solvent to be added. At this point, it's your choice whether to add solvent to the vial to continuously rinse out the sample, or to add directly to the NMR tube until you reach close to the reference mark. Always compare to the reference NMR tube to make sure you're getting close to the amount needed. A little bit less or a little bit more is fine. So now, make sure that you put the lid over so that your solvent does not evaporate. Make sure that you screw on the solvent cap tightly so it doesn't evaporate. And make sure that you make a readable mark on a piece of laboratory tape that will allow you to write more clearly, therefore your sample will be more appropriately labeled. Make sure that the labeling that you do needs to be on the top of the NMR tube, not near close to the bottom of it, because that will be an intrusion for when you're running your sample. And when you have finished, you can put it in the NMR rack until your sample can be run, and also make sure that you put away your solvent in the desiccator. We are going to prepare our instrument to take a sample. In order to do that, we need to gather certain materials that we're going to need throughout the whole process. We remember that we have all the things we need in this cabinet. I am just gonna grab these two binders and the logbook. I have all the information and directions in there that I might need. I need my sample holder where I have some samples that I might run today if I have time. But in reality, what we're gonna do mostly is preparation. This I'm gonna put aside for when we need it. In this box, you're going to find this measuring device that we use to make sure that our NMR tube is positioned correctly where we put it in the instrument. Also, we're going to grab one of the standards. We also need to do is to turn on the compressor. The air compressor has a switch on this side, but right above the plug-in. And in here it says it needs to be kept at 10 psi. You can check that by opening and looking at the gauge right above the machine. When that is on, that is to have a unit here that is making your sample spin inside your magnet. That sample is the sample that is going to help us to calibrate our instrument. In order to get the sample out of there, you need to use this kind of pointy lever and move it clockwise about 90 degrees, and then all the way pointing towards you. So that is your sample. And this is a Teflon insert that I'm going to remove. This sample of water is the sample that I'm going to use to calibrate the instrument. So now I'm going to put it back in there. And one thing that we need to do, avoid touching that insert as much as possible with our bare hands, because we have some grease on our hands that it gets deposited, and then it doesn't spin properly when you put it inside the machine. So now that you have that in, we need to make sure that it's positioned properly. So I'm going to push it gently down until it feels all the space of the grain measurement device. Now this is good. You can give it another swipe without moving the white Teflon insert. And then remember that black lever is pointing towards you. Now we set it there and see how it's moving. Again, slowly we go 90 degrees. What that does is that brings the sample down to the bottom of the probe, and then another 90 degrees that will be pointing away from you, and now the sample is spinning. You can actually look down the probe with the light and make sure that your sample is spinning. Should not be touched at any time during the process of handling the inserting the sample in the probe. Okay, we can close that. And now we are going to handle the software that is going to help us get our NMR machine calibrated and ready to use for running our sample.